Welcome to Unity Inspired Living. Our community began in 1989 as a small worldwide Unity book study group, and we've continued the momentum as an ever-evolving spiritual community. Each Sunday, you will find dynamic thought leaders delivering inspiring messages and talented musicians sharing sound healing through their melody. Here, we embrace ancient spiritual traditions, universal truths, and emerging wisdom. Let's check out this Sunday message. We're so grateful you've joined us. Ready to invite you to open your heart, open your mind, move anything out of the way, and be ready to receive as Savanna shares the message with us this morning. Kill the guru, free the self. Thank you, beloved.
You're welcome. Good morning, everyone. I'm so grateful to be here. This title, though, is it's a big one. I normally wouldn't use that term in a title, but once you hear this talk, I think it'll make a lot of sense. And I've missed you guys. I haven't been here in quite a while, so thank you for bringing me back here. And I want to talk about something today that I have rarely spoken about. Over the years, you might have heard little tidbits from my life in this regard of this topic today. But a lot of the work that I've been involved with is relationships and boundary work. And I want to talk about something that I think resonates with so many people when it comes to this search for freedom and meaning, especially right now. And when it comes to the search for purpose and identity. And it's really personal to me because I've been moving through a major transition. And I wanted to share this as a way to acknowledge wherever you are on the path. And if you're in some sort of transformation or pivot or transition, because I know that that time in all of our lives can be scary and uncertain. It can be an anxious time. And so my hope is that this supports you in framing whatever it is that you're going through. I've really been contemplating for the last few years what the idea of my work is. Like, who am I in this world, and what is my teaching? What are we doing here? And I think that ultimately, if we look at a lot of the New Thought spiritual teachings, it's really just a teaching of freedom and liberation. And it's about the freedom to choose and to know and to think and to become more. It's to be. And as the great metaphysician Ernest Holmes says, the goal of life is freedom from discord of every nature, and that this goal is sure to be attained by all. And so I've been asking myself this question in every area of my life, and I invite you into this question, which is how free do you actually feel? Not how successful you look, not how spiritually evolved you sound, not how polished your life appears from the outside, but I mean, how free do you feel inside your own choices? How free do you feel to allow that quiet voice to reveal itself in your body? How free do you feel to disappoint expectations, to change your mind about something, to grow, to evolve, to leave something that once defined you? How free do you feel, and this is a big one, to take up space, to speak? For many of us, we're in a pivot. I know I am, and we've come to the edge, and we know that we want and need something greater in our lives. And most of us, I think, say that we want freedom, but what I think we really want is certainty. We want someone to reassure us that the step that we're about to take is the right one. We want someone to confirm the path and say, yes, that's the path. Keep going that way. You're doing it correctly. And that desire for certainty is where I think something really subtle happens. Is we're looking for something out there and we begin to outsource our authority, like someone else must know the way, or this business idea, or this person, or this organization must know my path. And I think this goes deeper than our attachment wounds from childhood. You know, I am seen and loved and validated if I conform into the box that you've created, that the world has created and contained me in. And if I don't leave that box, then the apple cart's not going to tip over and you will not ultimately leave me. Like, that's been my story. You can probably tell by that. And so we look to the teachers and the leaders and the mentors and the spiritual figures, and we look to the systems and the organizations. We look to people in our lives that we believe are wiser and further along and more enlightened. And we read the books. We've all done this, and we attend the workshops and we listen to the podcasts and we gather wisdom wherever we can find it, which isn't wrong. To be clear, I love teachers. I've had incredible teachers in my life. Both my parents were teachers growing up. But at some point, I realized something slightly inconvenient, which is that none of them were actually living my life. And that is why I titled this Kill the Guru. Because what I mean is that at some point on the path of becoming fully yourself, you must stop outsourcing your inner knowing, that inner nudge, and giving authority away as if you don't know. It's that lie we talk about as if we don't know, and we do know. The teacher's job is not to lead your life. The teacher's job is to return you to your own knowing. There's this familiar saying, you've probably heard it in spiritual circles, that says, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. But I think there's a deeper truth that doesn't get talked about as often, which is when the student is truly ready, the teacher disappears because you finally learned to trust yourself. Because ultimately, no one can walk the path that only your soul knows. So when I first started walking this spiritual path about 25 years ago, I believed that the whole point, and I was pretty young, I think, 16. I believed the whole point was to find the right teacher, the right community. I wanted to become famous. I wanted to be really great in the world. And I had a lot of support in this New Thought organization behind me. And I had movers and shakers and creative people who had really big platforms and influence. And they had seen something in me and they would say, Savanna, you've got that thing. You've got it. Here's your destiny. You're going to do great things. Go forth. And they would say things like, you should do this, or have you considered this? And of course, they're well-intentioned. And at that time, for me, and of course, in the Centers for Spiritual Living community that I grew up in, the conversation at that time, because I was so young, was, well, the youth are our future, and you're our youngest spiritual leader in this global organization, and you're going to be the future, and all of these cool things, right? And so what did I do? I did everything I could to pursue that which I thought would give me approval. It would help me be visible and seen. And if they approve of me and they like what I'm doing, then I will be loved. I will belong. And so I read the books and I went to the workshops and I had people saying, oh my God, I wish that I was your age when I found this. And I sat in rooms with people who seemed wiser and calmer and more grounded and more certain about their lives than I ever felt. And I said yes to everything. I was yes, yes, yes. I said yes to everyone all the time because I thought that it would put me in front of people. And you know what? It did. And many of you may remember this. 2015, I was on the cover of Science Mind magazine and it went all over the world. And that magazine, ironically, this is kind of funny, ended up in a West Texas jail where I grew up. And there was a guy that I knew from high school who he was in the day room, I guess, and he saw my last name. And he said, oh my God, I know her. And I had people in other parts of the world sending me photographs, of the magazine cover of them near bus stops and mountaintops. And it was really cool. And it went all over the world. And so I spent about 20 years walking inside this spiritual community. And many of you have known me for quite a while, rooted in our new thought principles, these ideas that we understand that are so beautiful and so life affirming about consciousness and creativity and the power of the mind to shape our reality. And, we talk about quantum physics and how waves collapse into form and how our thoughts become things. And we're taught about the divinity and the interconnectedness of life. And that ultimately we are all one, and that there's one thing happening in the mind of the divine, and that we have dominion over our attention and our reality. And this teaching that I grew up in is life affirming and expansive, and I loved it. And it's given me, I'm sure you can relate, like language for the things that I already felt like deep in my bones. Yet I always had this pull that I needed to do something more, that there was something different for me. So, unlike a lot of people in the teaching, I really explored those edges. And so instead of taking a pulpit like most people thought I would do, I decided that I wanted to go live and teach and speak in Ukraine. And I was there 7 different times over a span of 11 years because no one could teach me in a pulpit what I was learning and experiencing in the world about culture and nuance and noise and power and former Soviet things that affected how I was teaching my classes and what I could and couldn't say in those classes. And so I have story after story of people in dire situations. And I have witnessed Ukrainian true resilience. And I've witnessed the coming together of people at war. And it's taught me about humility and it's taught me about being present. It's taught me about how to navigate political upheaval in times where I needed to really keep my mouth shut, so that I could travel where I needed to go. And it was also a quick history lesson. Back in 2011, I remember I was asked to do like a mock panel because I was going in for my ministerial panels and it was like practice, right? Like what to expect before you do the big thing. So I'm sitting in front of these people at Mile High Church in Denver, Colorado, and they're asking me all sorts of questions like, well, what do you envision for your ministry? And I was probably in my mid-20s. And I remember saying, I want to have a ministry that's global. I want a ministry without walls. I want to be able to talk to people from different cultures and lifestyles and backgrounds. And I want to have a virtual online ministry. And if you think all the way back to 2011, virtual anything was not very common. Remote work was not that common. I remember having flyers as a virtual assistant and that I was going to like go around the world being a travel writer and having like a virtual online ministry. And I will never forget, there was a guy on the panel who looked over at me like kind of dumbfounded and said, well, that's not real ministry. And I remember the other two kind of defending me and like looking at each other like, did he just say that? And I walked out of there feeling so defeated, so upset because they could not see the vision that I saw. They couldn't see it. And then around 2012, I found myself chasing this Egyptian man to his homeland and village in southern Egypt. And if you all remember, 2012 was like during the aftermath of the Arab Spring Revolution. And he happened to work for the UN and he was taking photos in Tahrir Square. And, we were glued to the news and all of the lessons and the experiences there that I could have ever gained, I got in Egypt. I couldn't have gotten behind a pulpit. We traveled to his village where um, people would come up to me and like want to touch my skin, and it was just so interesting. Where we had fresh fruits and vegetables on the Nile, and we took these convoys out into the desert to visit like different temples, like the Temple of Hathor and Dendera, and it was powerful and it was palpable. And the interesting thing about Egypt is that even just being there, it's like it's always calling me deeper. I kept saying, I want to build a community without walls. So I had thought that Ukraine was hard, but living in Egypt prepared me for far more than I could have ever learned behind a pulpit. And so living in Egypt, it was like this subtly oppressed male dominance, but you've got me, the strong-willed, independent, get around on my own Savannah. What I noticed about myself is I became smaller and I became quieter. And I spent those 9 months just trying to figure out why I felt so crazy. And my inner child was going nuts, screaming with this war going on and this potential, bomb going off in other parts of Cairo. And I kept asking myself, what am I doing here? I had just finished my ministerial exams and I was just about to take the master's exams. And here I am in ministerial school, and I'm studying Gnosticism, like traveling down the Nile where they discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls in Egypt. And I'm learning about social uprising and revolution and the power of women there and what it means to really build a civil society. And I'm learning, how do I find my spiritual connection? How do I find the sacred amidst the shadow? And when I came back to the States and we broke up after 4 years together, I was so devastated because I had no idea. I was like, what am I going to do now with my ministry? I have this traveling ministry without roots. And so, not long after that, I was asked to speak at this conference in Vancouver, opening for the famous DJ Les Brown. I don't know if you remember him, but he's this motivational speaker. And I had 10 minutes to give this talk, or they were going to like pull me off the stage. And I came onto the stage in an Egyptian abaya, like fresh off the plane, basically from Egypt. And I said, Здравствуйте, Salam alaikum, and good evening to you. And the whole place just got quiet. And my entire talk was about the power of showing up. And my knees knocked, and I was scared, and my voice shook. And then people cheered, and all of my biggest fans were there, and there was a shout out from Les Brown himself. And yet, after it was all said and done, I still felt out of place. I still felt like, is there a place for me to share the knowledge that I have just come to know? Like, no one can really comprehend what I just witnessed of military in the streets and bombs going off and constantly having to watch my back and afraid to leave my apartment. And the contrast was so great. And so, what I've realized is that I've rarely fit into this model of ministry that has been around for a really long time. So, the question I've asked, and I say all of this obviously because I think it relates to all of us, is that where do we belong? Like, where do I belong? I would ask. And so I studied deeply and I showed up and I did the ministerial thing and I became a spiritual practitioner because I wanted to coach and counsel people. And I've done some incredible things in my life. And if I'm being honest, though, there was a part of me that was always waiting for something, like waiting for someone to recognize me, waiting for someone to say, okay, you're ready now. This is your place. This is your role. This is your path. You did the thing. You did the right thing. Waiting on someone to tell me the next step or to give me the opportunity. And interestingly, every single time another opportunity came, it turned out that there was something weird about it, or there was some malpractice, or there was something inauthentic about it. And it wasn't something that was aligned with me. So then people that I had on pedestals, who I had admired, those people fell off those pedestals. And the teachers that I had put so much merit into were human. I realized they're human. And yet I had cheerleaders saying, you're a star, you're meant for this. And I just kept waiting for this big thing to occur. And I don't think that I'm alone in that. I think that there is something deeply human about wanting someone else to validate the path that we're on and to validate what we feel inside. But over time, something began happening in me. It was like this quiet, persistent friction. And it wasn't anger, it was just this friction. It was this resistance. Like, I'm seeking something more, a bigger pond, a bigger platform, something more aligned with me, less jargon and more real talk. And so I started speaking. I noticed in my talks, I started speaking less from this egoic sense, see me place, see me, and more of a, I want to serve space. Like, how can I serve? And I slowly started realizing something difficult, that the path that I had trained for and that I dove into for so long wasn't completely the path that my soul wanted to walk. It was only one part of this unfolding. It was 25 years of my life. And so that realization for me has been jarring and humbling and dysregulating. It's been terrifying because when you've invested years of study and service and relationships and my whole identity, stepping away from it feels like betrayal. And I've worried about people in my orbit being disappointed in me or not supporting me if I stepped away, or if, because I realize I had like this belonging trauma. My identity and my belonging tied to this organization of New Thought that I do not feel identified fully with anymore, that I feel some false loyalties to. And so that friction and that resistance that I've been feeling, it's not failure. I've had to realize that it's just misalignment, that sometimes we outgrow those things, that it was my becoming, that because no organization or person or system can define the path that I was meant to walk. And the funniest part of this is I knew this 20 years ago. I even said it to somebody 20 years ago. I was like, I'm probably just going to walk away from the organization and do my own thing and create my own work. And now here we are. And so no one can walk the path that only your soul knows. And so I think that when we feel this tension in our lives, we assume maybe that something's gone wrong. But sometimes I think the friction is where we feel is actually pointing to this fracture within us. It's the misalignment. It's this place where we split from our truth in order to belong. So this I am a minister, I think, I am so much more than that. We are so much more than the roles and the identities. And so maybe you silenced your intuition and maybe, I know I did, followed a path that made sense for everyone else. And maybe we stayed loyal to an identity that once served us, but it doesn't fit the person that we're becoming. And so that friction, that subtle ache, it's information and it's saying, your deeper self is saying, come back, come back. I don't know if you've heard of the work of Francis Weller, but I love Francis Weller's work. And Weller speaks a lot about grief and grief not only as something that happens, when we lose a person, but it's also as something that happens when we lose a part of ourselves. And throughout our lives, we abandon pieces of who we are in order to belong or to survive or to be accepted. And Weller says that, those parts of us don't disappear. They're just patiently waiting for us. And he writes about grief as something that enlarges the soul. That grief is not just pain to be avoided. He says it's an initiation. And it is the soul recognizing what matters and calling us back to what is real. In so many indigenous traditions, grief is not something people carry alone in silence. It's actually witnessed, it's ritualized, it's honored because grief marks the crossing between who we were and who we are becoming. One of my colleagues and friends who I've been working with recently, Mark Groves, he said, you cannot become who you were meant to be without letting something else die. And so that is what I've been walking through, not just leaving an organization, but grieving an identity, grieving the version of myself who believed that this path was going to be handed to me. And a lot of it was, and it was beautiful. And it's also grieving the comfort of belonging to a structure that told me this is who you are, and you know how to operate in this. Because when you step away from that, you enter wild territory. So I want to pause for just a second. And I want to invite us into a moment of really small reflection. And I want you to just ask yourself the question, what part of me have I had to silence in order to belong? What part of me have I had to silence in order to belong? I mean, maybe it was your voice, maybe it was your creativity, maybe it was your truth, or maybe it was your courage. And it's a question that we can just sit with and notice what arises. Because then we get to ask the question, what part of me is trying to come back? What part of me is trying to come back? Because the work of becoming ourselves, I think, often begins there. And it's with the parts of us that actually never truly left. They were just waiting for us to return. And so if we feel grief around that, which I know I have too, it's not something we have to fix. Because as I said before, grief is often what we feel when the soul outgrows the life that once fit inside of it. I think in our culture, we dismiss sometimes our intuition and ritual and symbolism and mystery. And, people say, you're so woo. You're so woo woo, But many indigenous traditions have always understood something very profound. And we teach this, which is that the unseen shapes the seen. Our body knows things before our mind does. Our dreams speak in symbology and symbols, and our grief carries a certain wisdom and that quiet guidance that we feel inside. It's the one that we often ignore because it doesn't come with, identity and credentials. It's often the most trustworthy source that we have, and it's the most trustworthy voice that we have. And so when we say woo, maybe the woo is the way. The mystical is not an escape from reality, it is a deeper participation in it. So to wrap all of this together, here I am now, 25 years later, into this spiritual path that has shaped me, and realizing that if I'm going to do the work that I feel called to do in this lifetime, and we all have our work, we all have our purpose, we all have that urge, that nudge, right? And if I'm going to do the work that I feel called to do in this lifetime, then I have to leave the nest. And you might have to do that too. And there's a grief there that I'm walking through, and a grief of, why didn't I leave sooner? A grief of what I might lose, or the identity that kept me safe and small. And so I invite you and myself to trust that the years that, we've spent learning and been on this path, those years were not wasted. To trust that everything I studied will weave itself into my work, which it does. To trust that my voice does not need to sound like anyone else's, and neither does yours. Because at some point on this spiritual path, it stops being about finding the right teacher, and then it starts being about becoming the adult in our own soul. And I think that is the moment that we finally kill the guru. And it's not the teacher that's outside of us, but it's this belief that someone else must define the path. And if you take anything from this talk, it is eventually that you remember no one can walk the path that only your soul knows. Ernest Holmes said, never limit your view of life by any past experience. The only limit to your realization of tomorrow will be your doubts of today. So be willing to step out into the unknown and trust that the spirit within you is greater than any circumstance. So, all my friends, I think there comes this moment on the spiritual path when we are called to step into the unknown on this path that we don't get to know the ending. The teachers that once guided us, they no longer can answer the questions of our hearts. And the systems that, once held us begin to feel too small for the life that we're wanting to step into, for who we're becoming. It could be the job, it could be the relationship that you're afraid to leave, but you know that you've outgrown. It's the smallness or the small life that you've consented to in order to stay in what you perceive as comfort because it's familiar. That's why Michael Beckwith always says the pain pushes until the vision pulls. And in that moment, many people turn back. Like in that exact moment, they return to what is familiar. They stay inside the identity that the world understands. But some people choose something braver and they step into the unknown and they listen to this voice inside them that says, there is more here. There is another way. And if you find yourself in that place right now, you're feeling this resistance or this friction, this feeling of grief. It's this feeling, the pull towards something that you can't even name yet. I want you to know this, that nothing has gone wrong, that you are not lost, that you are being initiated into your own authority. And the most radical thing that we can do in this lifetime is not follow someone else's path perfectly, to trust our own path enough to walk it, even when no one else can see where it leads. You remember that story I told you about how they said online ministry is not real ministry? Well, guess what? Are we doing ministry online right now? When I came to Seattle and COVID hit, and we took out our iPhones and we all started live streaming. It was the one thing that saved our our ministries. And I had to giggle and laugh to myself and say, they couldn't see my vision then, but it didn't mean that I lost sight of it. I kept holding it, right? Because the guru that you have been searching for has been in your body, has been inside you this entire time. And that is the message. And the moment that we begin to trust that voice is the moment I think that our real life begins. And mine is. And so I think that's all I want to say. I think it's an and so it is. Amen.
And so it is. Thank you, beloved. We are so grateful for you and your spirit and your truth and your willingness to listen. I mean, that takes courage. And I think that's a lot of times where people can get in a rut, or just kind of get stagnant or get stuck because you get familiar, you get comfortable, and then it takes some courage, takes some bravery to say, but I'm gonna go this direction, even though it might not make sense or they don't see the vision or whatever it is. So bravo.
Thank you. It's a
Yeah.
hard one to give, but it needs to be said.
Yeah. I love the message. I think I think we all have moments where we come in and out of the whole, kill the guru, free the self. And yet to really come to the place of living in that, I think is so powerful. It's the know thyself piece, right? And you said, we stop like finding or seeking the right teacher and then trusting ourselves. And it kind of made me think of like even just our nervous system with relationship type of stuff, and you mentioned attachment styles at the beginning of your talk and how if you're more of an anxiously attached person, it's like you become needy of having that oxytocin and the person and to feed. And sometimes, You have to learn how to trust yourself, to love yourself, and not the outside. And then this, it connects as finding the right teacher, it's like, or finding somebody to fill that need. It's like, you are the medicine all along. We are our own medicine. And the power in really letting that land and embodying that is so big. And what you're speaking to today. I didn't finish writing the whole quote you said, Mark Groves. It started with, you cannot become something you're meant to be. And then, but I remember him saying something like, nothing that is meant for you will ever require you to abandon yourself to keep it. I think it was kind of along those same lines.
Yeah, he said that's true. That's also true. And he said you cannot become who you're meant to be without letting something else die.
Right. Without letting something else die. Oof.
I know.
Yeah.
It's intense. It's a lot.
It is intense. I mean, and I'm saying grief has been my crucible in this life. And so I attest to exactly the things you're talking about, grief. And some of the people you were quoting about grief is something that happens when it's not just like death, right? It's we lost that piece of identity. We lost that relationship, that job, that dream. Um, so many components, facets of life can create grief. Sometimes we just think it's, death of another person, and that's not necessarily the case. So when we broaden our scope to include all of that, it's like, oh, we can offer ourselves that grace. And like you talked about, a lot of other cultures, and I've spoken about this a lot too, have space for this time when you're in this transformation, you're in this process, and it's really vital. It's vital. Let's see here. I was writing down lots of things. I like that you began with saying, when a student is truly ready, the teacher disappears.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that. And not that, there's so many, we're so complex. The human is so complex. So, we might not be needing a teacher here, but maybe we're having some sort of health thing. Okay, so right now maybe we need to find the teacher in that moment. So it's not like saying, oh, forget all teachers, right? We're saying it's both and, it gets to the point where I gain the information, I learn, and then the truth resides within me. I am the medicine. I know the truth instead of seeking the answers outside, which is what we can get into. And you spoke to this when you said, no one can walk the path that only your soul knows. And that's a big, big statement.
Mm-hmm.
So you can get advice, you can get guidance, you can get teachings, and yet only your soul really knows what you're supposed to be doing, where you're supposed to be. So thank you, Savanna, for being with us and sharing your soul,
Yeah.
because we feel you. Let's check in with the feed here. And check back with everybody. Michael J says, okay, you're talking my experience. Blessings. Sonia says, what part of me have I had to silence in order to feel I belong? Oh, yeah, that was one of the questions I think you had been giving for reflection. Yeah, that's a good one, huh? Because sometimes we don't realize. Sometimes it's after, like way after the fact, we realize, oh my gosh, I was doing that. So in the moment, take a little moment to reflect. It's a great question. Michael J says, drop the mic. Marianne says, and so it is. Luinda says, thank you for your inspiring words, Savanna. I believe sometimes the answer we are looking for lies within. Thanks for the reminder. Michael J says, everything is within, bitter and sweet. Pat says, Savannah, I am realizing that in my 80s. Congratulations to you that you have come to that at your age. Yes, I feel the same. We're all cheering you on. Savannah. Jennifer says, thank you so much, Reverend Savannah, for this powerful and potent message.
Mhm.
Indeed, it is, because she is a powerful
Thank you.
being. And we are so grateful for you. I'm just looking at my notes to see if there's anything else I can't miss saying. Bob says, you know yourself best. Yeah. And sometimes we need this reminder, right? And there's lots of information and advice and words of wisdom out there, and they're all great. And we can take all of that and then bring it to the source.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people might be wondering, okay, well, if you're leaving the nest, then what are you doing? I'd love to share that if that's okay.
Yeah, I would love,
Um,
we would love for you to share that.
Yeah, so I have launched myself into the world of podcasting. So you can find my recently launched podcast called the Savanna Noelle podcast. It's on Apple and Spotify, and it's also on Substack. So you can follow all my writings. And every time I release, a new episode, it goes out on Substack, which is also a way that people can support my work and the expansion of it. I'm also in a process right now. I'm about to launch a one-on-one coaching program, which I'm super excited about. And the program is called, makes sense, Come Back to Yourself. So it's a 4-week moduled coaching program, and it's literally about to launch. So super excited. But you can find all that information. It's going to be on my website soon. This is a process, but you can
Mhm.
find me, you can find all the information on my Substack, on Facebook, Instagram, and then yeah, go follow my podcast.
We will.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Exciting.
beloved. We are so grateful for you, for your share, for all that you are bringing to the world, all that you showed up. You were telling the story about showing up opening for Les Brown.
Yeah.
You showed up. Yeah, there's so much in showing up and saying yes. Well, how can I serve? And you made that point too, which I think is really, really vital.
Yeah.
Um, because when we start asking that question,
You show up
the
different.
show up differently.
Yeah,
That's exactly right. It's a whole different game. You're in the whole different field.
totally.
Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up too. It's a different space to be in. Uh, did Sonia say something new? Let me see. That was a mic drop. I was thinking that right as Amy read Michael J's comment. Yeah. Oh, good stuff here. Good stuff. Well, Reverend Savannah, we love you. We support you. We're so grateful for you, and we will follow you and find you and track you. And I know we'll see you again here. And we support you and thank you for your authenticity, your courage, your bravery, your willingness to say yes and show up. Uh,
Thanks for having
it
me.
changes the trajectory of everything. Yeah. So thank you. And everybody remember to share the messages you hear out because um, this community can, not only nourish your life, it can nourish other lives. So find the message on YouTube and share it with somebody that you know. I mean, everybody would like to hear this message.
Thank you.
So thank you for being here, beautiful souls. We invite you to participate in the sacred exchange of giving. You can do that on our website, unityinspiredliving.org. Please know that your generosity allows this space of connection, music, transformation to continue. It is meaningful, and we are so grateful. We are going to close with our prayer of divine. No, we are closing with our prayer of protection. And I want you to allow this prayer to land for yourself, to receive this prayer. The light of God surrounds you. The love of God enfolds you. The power of God protects you. Presence of God watches over you. The mind of God guides you. The life of God flows through you. The laws of God direct you. Peace of God abides within you. The joy of God uplifts you. The strength of God renews you. The beauty of God inspires you. And wherever you are, God is, and all is well. And that is why you are the guru. That is why the source is here, because all that. Thank you, beautiful Reverend Savanna. We support you. We will follow you. We are grateful for you. Blessings, blessings. And thank you, everybody, for being with us today and co-creating this space. Shine on, bright ones. We love you. Blessings and peace.